Everything is fine, and that is exactly what worries you. The good stretch has gone on too long. Things have been quiet for too many days. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a small and persistent voice is already preparing for whatever comes next. If you have spent your life waiting for the other shoe to drop, this video is for you. The feeling of impending dread, the sense that something bad is just around the corner even when everything is objectively fine, is one of the most exhausting and least understood experiences a person can carry. It is not pessimism, it is not a choice, and it is not, as people sometimes suggest, simply a matter of thinking more positively. What it actually is in most cases is a nervous system that learned something very specific at some point in its history. It learned that good things do not last, that calm is not safety, it is the pause before something happens, that the appropriate response to peace is not to relax into it but to stay alert inside it. And once a nervous system learns this, it does not simply unlearn it when the circumstances change. It keeps running the same program in new rooms with new people, long after the original reason for it has gone. This is worth sitting with for a moment because it reframes something that a lot of people have spent years quietly blaming themselves for. You may have been told, directly or indirectly, that you worry too much, that you should just relax and enjoy things, that your inability to simply be happy when things are good is somehow a failure of gratitude or perspective. None of that is accurate. What you are experiencing is not a character defect. It is a physiological pattern built for a reason, doing exactly what it was built to do. And what comes next might explain something about yourself that you have never quite been able to understand. Trait 1. Your nervous system never got the memo that things changed. The anticipatory anxiety you carry did not arrive without reason. At some point, often in childhood, often in an environment that was genuinely unpredictable, your brain and nervous system learned a lesson that was completely rational at the time. The lesson was this: do not fully relax, because when things seem fine, that is often when something happens. And so the alarm system stayed on. The problem is that alarm systems do not update themselves automatically when circumstances change. The nervous system that learned to brace in an unpredictable household does not receive a notification when you move into a safe one. It keeps scanning, it keeps preparing, it keeps finding the threat that isn't there or deciding that the absence of visible threat is itself suspicious. This is not a personality flaw. This is a survival mechanism that outlasted the situation that created it. Understanding this does not immediately fix the feeling, but it changes what the feeling means about you. There is also something worth noting about how this shows up physically, not just mentally. Many people with this pattern describe a low hum of tension in the body, a tightness in the chest or shoulders, a shallowness to their breathing that exists independently of any conscious thought about danger. The mind may know things are fine, the body has not received that memo. This is one of the clearest signs that what is happening is not a thinking problem to be reasoned out of, but a nervous system state that needs different kinds of evidence, repeated, embodied, felt evidence, before it will genuinely stand down. Trait 2. You catastrophize as a form of control. There is a particular logic to the way anticipatory anxiety works that most people who do not have it find difficult to understand. When you imagine the worst possible outcome, when you run through the disaster scenario in advance, it does not feel like torture. It feels on some level like preparation, like control, like if you have already thought of the terrible thing, it cannot arrive unannounced. This is not irrational, it is a coping strategy. If the bad thing is going to happen anyway, at least this way you will not be caught off guard. At least this way you will have already survived it once in your head before it arrives in reality. The exhausting part is that the bad thing usually does not arrive, and so you survive it over and over in anticipation without ever getting the relief of having actually been through it. The catastrophizing is trying to protect you. It has simply never quite figured out that in most rooms, on most days, the protection is not required. Think about how much energy this actually takes over the course of a single week. Every uncertain situation gets a full mental rehearsal of its worst possible ending. A delayed reply becomes evidence of anger. A quiet room becomes evidence of disapproval. A minor symptom becomes, however briefly, a serious illness in your mind before it resolves into nothing. None of these rehearsals change the outcome, but each one costs something: attention, calm, the capacity to simply be where you are. Recognizing the pattern, rather than being swept along by each individual instance of it, is often the first real step toward loosening its grip. And this next one explains something about why happiness is one of the hardest things for you to simply be inside. Trait 3. You cannot fully inhabit good moments because you are already bracing for when they end. One of the most painful symptoms of anticipatory anxiety is the inability to be fully present during good times. When something good is happening, a calm period, a happy relationship, a period of stability, a part of you is already calculating how long it can last. already identifying the thing that could go wrong, already preparing for the grief of losing what you currently have. This means that the good moments, instead of being fully inhabited, are partially watched from a distance. You are in them, but not entirely in them. There is always a part of you that is standing slightly apart, monitoring, tracking, waiting. The joy exists, but it is threaded through with a watchfulness that other people do not seem to carry. And the terrible irony is that the very thing you are trying to protect yourself from, the pain of loss, is already happening in advance, in the form of not being able to fully have what you are protecting. Trait 4, you are extraordinarily good at sensing when something is wrong. Here is the other side of this particular coin, and it is worth saying clearly. The same mechanism that produces the anticipatory dread also produces something genuinely valuable. You are almost certainly one of the most perceptive people in most rooms you enter. You notice things. You pick up on shifts in atmosphere, changes in tone, the early warning signs of problems that other people only notice once they have already arrived. This is not a coincidence. Same nervous system that stays on alert for threats also stays on alert for information, and over years of practice it has become very good at reading it. People around you have probably benefited from this quality without knowing where it came from. The early warning you gave that something was wrong. The uncomfortable truth you named before anyone else was ready to name it. The problem you identified early enough to do something about. These things came from the same place as the dread, and they matter. And this last one might be the most important thing I can say to you about why this feeling has stayed so long. Trait 5, the anxiety was once the most rational response available, and your brain hasn't had reason to update. There's something worth saying directly about anticipatory anxiety. In most cases, it was not always anxiety in the clinical sense. It was once, in the environment where it was learned, completely appropriate vigilance. If you grew up in a home where things shifted without warning, where good periods were reliably followed by difficult ones, where the calm really was often the quiet before something, then staying alert made complete and rational sense. The anxiety is not irrational. It is simply out of date. It is a survival strategy that worked in the conditions that created it and has not yet received, through enough consistent experience of safety, convincing evidence that the conditions have changed. This is why simply deciding to think differently does not work. The nervous system does not update through thought. It updates through experience, slow, repeated, accumulated experience of calm that actually held. Of good things that were actually allowed to last. And that updating, while it takes time, is entirely possible. It is worth being honest about the timeline here, because a lot of people give up on this process too early, expecting a single insight to undo years of learned bracing. It does not work that way, and that is not a failure on your part. Every time you notice the dread arriving and stay present anyway, every time something good happens and is simply allowed to be good without disaster following it, you are adding one more piece of evidence to a case that your nervous system is quietly building. Eventually, with enough of that evidence, the case starts to shift, slowly and then, at some point, more than you expected. The tendency to expect the worst rarely begins with the person who carries it. In most cases it was learned, absorbed from an environment where unpredictability was genuinely present, or passed down from someone who had learned it themselves. A parent who was always braced for disaster. A household where good news was received with suspicion rather than celebration. A family system that had been through enough difficulty that optimism felt like tempting fate. The wariness is not a character trait you were born with. It is something you learned in a specific environment from specific people who had learned it before you. And what was learned can, with time and patience and the right kind of experience, begin to be unlearned. And before we finish, the one thing I most want you to hold from this video. The feeling that something bad is about to happen is not evidence that something bad is about to happen. It is evidence that at some point your nervous system made a very reasonable decision to stay alert and has not yet been convinced through enough experience of sustained safety to put the alert down. That is not a character flaw. That is a nervous system doing its job with old information. This week, try one small thing. The next time things are genuinely fine and the familiar dread arrives anyway, try to name it out loud or on paper. This is my nervous system running an old program. The room is actually safe. Not to argue the feeling away, but to separate it from the belief that it is always predicting something real. That separation, practiced slowly over time, is where things begin to genuinely shift. If someone you know needed to hear this today, share this with them. Sometimes understanding where something came from is the beginning of being able to put it down. Take care of yourself, and we will see you next time.